Hello, today I'm going to talk about the game Asteroid Zero-Four from Task Force Games. It's one of their kind of small book games. It's 5.5 by 8.25 inches. The artwork is typical Task Force Games, and it's kind of light and I think conveys the theme well of combat against facilities on asteroids. Actually, on the back they got a little more artwork that's kind of more realistic kind of looking art. So they have a good job of having like almost a page of theme in the rules as well, but just to give a sense of it. Each player commands one of the two asteroid bases. At his disposal are missiles to bombard the enemy base, and laser towers and space defense missiles to defend his own base. Manned spacecraft can be used as defensive interceptors or to deliver nuclear weapons. Each warhead that impacts is calculated for yield, burst height, and blast radius, resulting in damage to the various installations on the asteroids. Engineer units on the base can repair damaged systems, but are themselves vulnerable to nuclear and conventional explosions. And it's set about 50 years in the future, and this was published in 1979, so it'd be 9 years from the present day. As man expanded through the solar system, the need for high-grade metal ore became acute. Fortunately, the asteroid belts proved to be rich in metal, and the two major governments on Earth, the USA and USSR, Soviet Union, built large and complex mining bases in the asteroid belt. The American base, known as MacArthur Station, was built on an asteroid which had been designated as Asteroid Zero-Four in the Asteroid Belt Survey of 2027. The Russian base, known as Leningrad Station, was built on Asteroid Zero-Two, and then it talks about how the solar flare is going to come. When the solar flare happens, the asteroid belt will be basically isolated from Earth. So they're going to fight it out while they're isolated from Earth to get supremacy of the asteroid belt. This concept. Then for components, there's, of course, the rules. It's 19 pages of rules, and then at the end it has a couple pages of player aids. It's usually nice to have these separate, but since you can just fold out the book to have them all set here, I think that's fine. And in addition to the rules, they have some player aids. These are strategic cards, one for American and one for the Soviets. That's two-player, the American versus the Soviets. Here's the markers. These are the unique counters down here, which I'll talk about. These are the American units, basically a mixture of spaceships and missiles and engineers, and Soviets, a mixture of spaceships, missiles, and engineers. And these are all damage markers. So these are the unique units, and it's somewhat asymmetrical in that even though the Americans and Russians both have missiles, ships, and engineers, there are some differences in the ships. First of all, just a turn marker. Then for the Americans, they have engineers, missiles, and they only have one type of ship. It's a fighter bomber, the FS-30 Condor space fighter bomber. The Soviets have engineers, missiles. Then they have three types of ships. Comet space bomber, which has longer range than the Condor, but higher payload and less maneuverability. The Meteor space fighter, which is highly maneuverable but short-ranged. And then the planetoid class space tankers. And these are a variety of damage markers. And then here's the map, which I quite like. I think they did a good job. I like the color. It's kind of off, beige or whatever. And then the asteroids. Asteroid Zero-Four, the American asteroid, and Asteroid Zero-Two, the Russian asteroid. So it shows, some terrain features and then permanent installations that are on there. So there's, command bunker, living quarters or processing plant, laser tower, space defense missile. These are tunnels. And these are across, both asteroids. Missile launch pad, missile silos, stockpiles. And these trains are mountains. Landing pad, cargo, ship landing pad, retractable landing pad. I think it's done well. The strategic display, which is here. The combat space patrol is to hold those spacecraft which are assigned to protect the home asteroid. Generally, the strike box is used to hold those spacecraft missiles which are to be used on the current turn to attack the enemy asteroid. The strike escort box holds the spacecraft which are being used to escort the strike forces. The need refueling box is used to hold those spacecraft which need refueling. The strike holding box is used to hold spacecraft which may be used in the next turn to attack the enemy asteroids. The rare area box is used to hold spacecraft which have been sent away from the combat zone or which have not yet arrived from Earth. The deployment boxes are used in secret and simultaneous deployment of spacecraft missiles. Sequence of flight. Allocation phase, which is missile launch segment, spacecraft launch, deployment recording segment, strategic display, and deployment segment. 2 is preparation and repair phase, preparation, spacecraft repair and refuel, engineer segment. 3, space combat, Russian sector, American sector. 4, strike phase, Russian asteroid map, defense missile, missile impact, missile damage resolution, spacecraft attack, spacecraft damage resolution, spacecraft return, and then on the American asteroid map, defense missile, missile impact, missile damage resolution, spacecraft attack, spacecraft damage resolution, spacecraft return segment. These steps constitute one turn of the game. Weapons effects tables. To determine the damage done to a hex, divide the number of explosion factors applied to a hex by defense factor, hex dropping all fractions. The resulting number is the number of damage steps applied to the system. This is recorded placing a damage marker in the appropriate number. Hex damage markers X are used to indicate hexes that are irreparably damaged. The effects of these damage steps, the operation of the damage system is shown in the damage effects table. There's a couple scenarios. There's the introductory one, which I'll do. And then there's an advanced one, which is similar to the others, but the introductory, but there's more units involved. But I'll do the introductory one. And then finally, these are the charts and credits here. Laser tower charts, spacecraft versus laser tower chart, damage effects table, frag table, space defense missile chart, ordnance options chart, missile type chart, missile scatter table, weapons effects table, manned spacecraft table, manned spacecraft combat results table. Then we'll get into setup and play. So here's setup. And the map's laid out, there's a scatter diagram, turn record track. I'm using a couple dice from a Task Force games that was in a box set. And they're small, but to be kind of authentic, I'll use those to be consistent. And I put all the damage counters over here, just so they're accessible. And then I'm doing the introductory scenario. So it talks about setting up the board. Both players prepare a control sheet for their missiles and spacecraft. For missiles, players should note the warhead type, the target hex, burst height, any damage scored on the missile should be recorded as the game progresses. For spacecraft, the players should provide space on the control sheets. Note what weapons are being carried and what damage has been taken. After setup is complete and all control sheets have been prepared, play begins for turn 1. I'll have a custom sheet to track this and also track the damage on the engineers as well. So the initial setup, the scenarios don't have any, the asteroids don't have any damage to them. Each player gets 6 engineer units, which may be set up in any command bunkers. For the Americans, I put 3 engineers in this command bunker and 3 engineers in this one. For the Soviets, I put 3 engineers in this one and 3 in this. For younger viewers, Soviets refers to the USSR. I guess that's maybe not common knowledge. And the engineers will have 4 activity points per turn. The Russian initial forces, 8 fighters, 4 bombers, and 1 tanker. 3 of the fighters may be set up in the Russian combat space patrol, which I did here. 3 are here. All those spacecraft must be set up one spacecraft per hex on landing fields on the Russian asteroid map. I set them up here. I put the bombers in the retractable. And then on the other landing sites, I put fighters. And I also have a tanker there as well. So that mix. Missiles, there's 3 Type A, 3B, 4C, 4D, and 1E for 15 total. Their type, of course, will be set up on that tracking sheet. So they'll be set up in the missile silos and missile command bunkers. So I put them, these are the silos put there, and then the remainder, you can have an unlimited number in the command bunkers. And I put a couple here, 4 here in this command bunker, and then the rest in this command bunker. So that's what I did for the missiles and the Russians. For their reinforcements, Group 1 arrives on turn 2. It's 1 tanker, 1 fighter, and 3 bombers. Group 2 arrives on turn 3, and that's a tanker, a fighter, and 3 bombers in there, right there. As far as the American forces, their initial 12 fighter bombers initially. 3 are set up in the combat space patrol right here. And the rest are in landing fields, and I put 5 on the retractable here, and the rest kind of on the perimeter of the asteroid. Missiles, they have 1 Type A, 2 B, 3C, 2Ds, and 2Xs for 10 total. And so I set those in the missile silos and command bunkers, put them in the silos here, one in the command bunker here, and then the remainder in this command bunker. And then their reinforcements, they have 5 fighter bombers here that arrive on turn 4. That's Group 1. Then Group 2 has 5 that arrive on turn 5. And then 3 has 5 that arrive on turn 6. And those are here. So it's 10 turns. Keep track on the turn record track here. Victory conditions. After the end of the scenario, players play an additional 5 turns during which only engineering units may move and function. At the end of that time, the player with the most complete and operable mining production tracks wins the game. Winning by 1, 2, or 3 tracks is a marginal victory. Winning by 4 to 7 tracks is a tactical victory. And winning by 8 or more tracks is a decisive victory. Destroying all enemy mining production tracks and all enemy spacecraft is a total victory. So it's set up, and then we'll get into play. So we're 1 turn into it here, and definitely shown that a lot can happen in even 1 turn. There was, space combat. There's some damage between the, strike escorts of the opposing forces, and that was recorded on the sheet. A lot of the materials made it through for the strike. The Russians specifically had a lot of success with their missile attacks, and they had a detonation here, and they had several like N3 very powerful missiles go through and damage production complexes and landing strips, killed even a couple engineers in this area. Did some damage to silos and the engineer in the silo there. So a lot of damage. Americans also did some damage, specifically to some silos here, and some landing strips and some space defense missiles. And the space defense missiles found were quite effective in the items that did get through, the missiles and spacecraft that did get through before the missiles hit, the Russians were able to take out a couple American missiles before they landed. The Americans damaged some missiles, but most of the missiles got through. The American space defense did take out fighter. Space defense missiles are very lethal, and they have a good probability of destroying either spacecraft or missiles. And so this shows the kind of casualties taken, the missiles that went through, and these are the reinforcements that are coming in. Then showing detail here on the tracking sheet, and again, feel free to use that tracking sheet. Set up the fighter bombers. You choose the ordnance package for the different ones, and for the American fighter bombers, I decided to go with the package 2, which is a 2 rockets and 3 N1s. And I just use that for all of them, but you can go with different packages for different ones. For the Russian fighters, getting from this chart, I went with the option of 2 rockets and 1 N1 bomb. And you choose the bombs by the options here. So I've shown there. Bombers, I went with the package of A with a N3 since they're very powerful. So, and then it shows several missiles have detonated or been destroyed, and those are marked off. You know, the target hex. Some missed the hex and some went on. When they miss, you do the scatter. And I chose low burst for all the missiles because I just wanted to seem to have pretty good damage doing the low burst. And then here I also show damage on some fighter bombers. Some been destroyed, some have a couple hits. Fighters, some with several hits on them. Bombers, some destroyed, some with several hits. Let's look at going into turn 2 now. So each player goes through the phases of the turn. Since I'm going against myself, I'll basically, for each phase, I'll have them both, do it. And I'll just kind of show highlights of each phase because it's very involved. So first, in the allocation phase, there's a missile launch segment. So each player can move from silos or launch pads to on the deployment board. For the American, they have one on a silo here, 7, and they have one, or that's on a launch pad, and then on a silo. So they'll be launching those, and they'll put them in the deployment boxes. And for each of those, that you indicate the burst height and the target hex. So 6 will go to, it's an N1, and it'll go to 1405, which is right here, because it's can potentially get that engineer and take out a space missile defense. We'll see what happens there. And then another will go to 2006, which is right here, which might hit, again, a space missile defense and might take out some missiles on a launch pad. We'll see what happens there. The Russian has 3, so they have one in a silo here, and then they have 2 in launch pads over here. So they'll be going, again, I select a low burst height for these over here for the Americans. And burst height here will be low, and so the target 1206, right here, right in the processing area, which might take out some lasers and launch pads. 1414, which is right in a command area here, which might take out some missiles. 0909, which is right here, may take out space missile defense, maybe hit an engineer, and then take out maybe some processing. And then those Russian missiles are moved to the deployment box. This turn the Russian is getting reinforcements, basically a fighter, a tanker, and 3 bombers. So these will be placed in the rear area. The American player isn't getting reinforcements this turn. And here are the Russian reinforcements placed in the rear area. Then we get into the spacecraft launch phase. So most of the spacecraft have already left the asteroid and they're being refueling and repaired. Got one under here that will launch. So I'll put them in the deployment box. And then I secretly record, as I have already, the ordinances that it has, and it has 2 rockets and 1 N1. And then a phase that applies when you're doing 2-player, not so much when you're doing 1-player. So these destination deployment phases, it's secret where they're going, which it might be strike, rear area, strike holding, strike escort, combat space patrol, or return to asteroid. Each of these correspond to much, and you'd record them on your sheet here. But since I'm just doing it against myself, I'll just basically put these in that corresponding area. So now you move the the elements around based on where they are in the deployment box. So the ones that need refueling, so basically they were in combat last time or on planet or the asteroid, and now they have to land on the asteroid for refueling. And similarly for the Russians. So they'll be refueling. Strike holding either has to go to strike escort, or return. I'll have the missile go to strike, and I'll have these go to the, there's actually a missile and a fighter bomber there, and then I'll have two in a strike escort. Strikes are one that go to the planets, so on a fighter there, and a couple fighters are the strike escort. And then these missiles what I just launched will go to strike, which means they'll go on the planet, and this will go to a strike escort, and then these missiles will go to strike. And now the missile preparation segment. If they have missiles in the command bunkers, they can move up to 2 of them to silos or launch pads. So the American will move to a couple launch pads there. And then the Russian also has some missiles. They'll move one out here to a launch pad, and then another to a launch pad. Now we're in the spacecraft repair and refuel segment. So the Americans have a few here. If they have damage, if they're within a hex of a flight control area, like here, they can get 3 repair. If not, they get 1. Fortunately, none of these are damaged, but they do get refueled. And similarly over here, tanker's getting refueled. Bomber, if he has more than 3 damage, if he has 3 damage, you can get those, otherwise he gets 1. But, I mean, if you were somewhere else. Looking at that one, he only has 1 damage. So that is repaired. And they get reloaded with their weapons. And if they are at FC, then they can get N3s. If not, anything else. But elsewhere they can't get N3s. But well, actually, that bomber is, so it's fortunate he landed at the FC. You can reload. So then we get into engineer movement and repair. They want to try to stay subsurface, otherwise they'll be exposed to bombing. And if they have some damage, in this scenario they start with 4 activity points, and they can use each of those activity points for repair, or they can exchange. Each one they exchange, they get 4 movement points. And so the Americans have lost 2 engineers, but they have 4 that are undamaged, and the Soviets have all 6 are undamaged. They want to work over here, and this is subsurface here. He's going to use 1 activity point to move 4, even though he doesn't need quite that much. And then he will be able to improve that by 3. So, and similarly, he'll come down and help 2. So he'll go he'll need 2 action points, so he needs, because more than 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So he gets there in 2, and then he can improve that by another 2. So that's where both the engine, and they're subsurface, so they're okay. And these guys will kind of get in position. That weapon is above the surface, so he just wants to get in position there. Because if he ends up on the surface, that's a problem. Then the Soviets, so let's see what they have. He'll expend 1 action point to do 4, so we'll go here. He'll just kind of get in position there then. Same for him, he'll kind of get in position, but he'll not go on the surface, because he would need 2 to go on the surface, and then he'd have 1 left to repair or to go back down, so it really won't do him any good. It's a silo, so he can go here and repair that. He repaired that. He moved, and then he still has movement in his action, so he can also go here Yeah, you can still repair. He'll get in position over here to help out over here, but not work. So the rest will just stay the same. It's now the space combat phase, where basically the strike escort will go against the combat space patrol, and then similarly, Americans to Russians, Russians to Americans. So first of all, to do that, we kind of set these out here. So I kind of set them out here. So I have the attacking Americans going against the defending Russians, and the attacking Russians going against the defending Americans. I'll just show an example here. So what you do is you pair them up, and if they don't have an equal match, you double them up. So combat is simultaneous in that you don't take damage until after it's resolved. So you take the total attack factor minus the defense factor. That gives you the attacker's superiority, then you roll the dice. And you take the damage. The Russian fighter, attack factor, American fighter bomber, defense of 4. So 6 difference. So 1, 2 damage. Indicate that on the chart. For a Russian fighter, when it gets 3 damage, points is destroyed. Bomber 5, tanker 5, U.S. fighter bomber 4, missile 4. And then these will attack, and they're combining their attack factors, so they have a 20 to 4. It's 10 size as it goes. 2, 4 damage, so he destroyed this one. And then the Americans will return fire. And so for the U.S. fighter bomber, attack factor of 9, and then the defense of the Russian fighter is 3, so 5 differential. 6, they miss. Now these guys will go, and they're attacking one of those. 2. So since they're attacking 1, differential is 5, 2, so 1 damage, and then it will indicate that on the Russian. And then similarly do that for the other one as well. So this one is removed. And then after the combat, the ones in the strike escort that survived will be needing refueling, so they'll be putting back there. And then it goes to the space defensive missile segment. Anything that made it through the battle there will come through from that survived in a strike, because the counter space control can shoot through the escort and try to get ones on the strike as well. But the Russians had a lot that survived that. So now they have coming to the surface 4 missiles and 1 fighter. So the Americans have 4 active space defense missiles batteries going against these incoming. They're going to be shooting at all the missiles. So, and then we refer to this chart here. So let's see, 3 destroyed. So 1 is destroyed. 5, 1 damage. So we'll indicate that in the missile. 1, another is destroyed. And finally, 6, it's 1 damage. Indicate that. So it was, pretty devastating. And then, of course, the Russians would do the same defense. And then we do the missile impact and damage. So a couple of the Russian missiles came through. Missile 8, which is shooting for 1-4-1-4. Then first we see if it hits. For American missiles, it hits on a 4 or less, and for Russian, it's 3 or less. So it didn't hit. Now we do a scatter. So it's going to go in 2, and we see how far. It goes 4 in that direction. To see the damage, we look at the type of missile it is. You look at the defense factors, and then you apply the damage in there. So that's the missile impact and damage. And then you do that for all the missiles that make it through. So the next phase is the spacecraft is coming in, and you could have several, but I had 1 left here, I'm coming in. And comes in at high altitude, and then it'll be a series of tactical turns until either the spacecraft is destroyed or it leaves. And so this spacecraft has 2 rockets and an M1, and he also has a laser. And these are laser towers. So he comes in high, and then the laser gets a chance to shoot, but since he's high here, he's 3 hexes away, so it can't hit him. And now he'll move forward 1, and now he's low. He's within 2 of the lasers, so they do a die roll. 6, no effect. And this one's within 3. That one's within 5. He's got a chance. Nope. That one's within 6. He's got a chance. Nope. So the lasers miss. So the spaceship drops its bomb on its 5th tactical turn, wherever he is. And now this laser tower can fire at him. 2 to 4. That roll 1. 2 damage, he's gone. If he had gone one more turn, he could have dropped his bomb, but he didn't make it there. And then if he would have dropped his bomb, it's N1 would have done 10. And he was holding out his rockets too. He was going to use those. If he would have done his rockets, he would have can do 5, but he's hanging on to those. So that's the conclusion of a turn. Here's a custom tracking sheet I put together. You can feel free to use this if you like. So that's Asteroid Zero-Four from Task Force Games from 1979. There's a lot going on there. I think it's a very entertaining game. You do need to make sure you got plenty of time to do it because each turn involves a lot of steps. Hopefully I was able to give you a sense. It does help having whether you do something like this. I mean, you're welcome to use one or your own. A lot of tactics going on. A lot of strategies. Components are nice. It's for a capsule kind of game. It's got a lot going for it. And if you're into kind of like the war game style with a lot of subtleties, I definitely recommend it. I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Thanks for your time.